بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم طه ما أنزلنا عليك القرآن لتشقى إلا تذكرة لمن يخشى تنزيلا ممن خلق الأرض والسماوات العلى.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على أشرف المرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. We continue inshallah ta'ala with the tafsir of Surah Taha and verses number 131 and 132 inshallah. 131 and 132 from Surah Taha. We recite them first inshallah. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. ولا تمدن عينيك إلى ما متعنا به أزواجا منهم زهرة الحياة الدنيا لنفتنهم فيه ورزق ربك خير وأبقى وأمر أهلك بالصلاة واصطبر عليها لا نسألك رزقا نحن نرزقك والعاقبة للتقوى. The translation of the two verses. And do not extend your eyes toward that by which we have given enjoyment to some categories of them, its being but the splendor of worldly life by which we test them, and the provision of your Lord is better and more enduring. And enjoin prayer upon your family and people, and be steadfast therein. We ask you not for provision, we provide for you. And the best outcome is for those of righteousness. So this is continuing from the previous ayah, the orders of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to the Prophet alayhi salatu wassalam, how to face the harm that he receives from the people of Quraysh, and for the ummah of the Prophet ﷺ to follow the same path. So after Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ordered the Prophet ﷺ to have sabr, to have patience with regards to what they say of harm to the Prophet ﷺ, and the ibadah to Allah and the dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that is the means for him to be pleased, and especially in the times of difficulties, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala giving the Prophet ﷺ another command, which is, as Imam al-Sa'di rahimahullah, he says, أي ولا تمد عينيك معجبا ولا تمدن. Do not تمدن. Al-mad is to stretch. So لا تمد عينيك, do not stretch your eyes. مد العينين, what does it mean for a person to extend or to stretch his eyes? It is used when someone is looking at something for a long period of time that would make him like what he sees. Or even if he doesn't like what he sees, but he keeps on staring at it, looking at it, till he desires it. It's exactly like when someone extends his hands to something that he desires. So, وَلَا تَمُدَّنَّ عَيْنَيْكَ. And we have to be, as we heard before, al-awamir, the commands of Allah, we are commanded to do it exactly as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ordered. And oftentimes people are in haste so that they would interpret it the way that they would desire, or the way that they see fits, and overlooking the specific command here. So do not extend your eyes. He says mu'jaban, liking, ولا تكرر النظر مستحسنا. Do not repeat the look in a state that you like what you see. إلى أحوال الدنيا, to the affairs of this worldly life. والممتعين بها, and those who are enjoying it. من المآكل والمشارب اللذيذة, food and drinks, delicious. والملابس الفاخرة, and luxurious clothings. والبيوت المزخرفة, and houses that are adorned. والنساء المجملة, and women, those who beautify themselves. فإن ذلك كله زهرة الحياة الدنيا. This is all زهرة الحياة الدنيا. Uh, so we'll get into inshallah ta'ala how the command is a very specific one. But here ولا تمدن عينيك إلى to ما متعنا به, what we made them enjoy. And al-mata' as described before is enjoyment, but it's temporary, it's not forever. أزواجا منهم. أزواجا منهم, that means certain categories of people, meaning أزواجا منهم, them and their spouses, their families, and the things that people would see in this life when they have their spouses and their families and their dwellings. منهم, from the disbelievers, from the disbelievers. زهرة الحياة الدنيا. الزهرة comes from الزهر, and الزهر is the first thing that comes from the plants or from the trees, the first outburst of the produce or the flowers, not the flower itself. It's the first thing that comes out. And it's used for anything that gives bahja, or gives, as he says, تبتهج بها نفوس المغترين, anything that brings happiness, or when you see the flowers first come out, it's something that brings a good feeling. This is the something that brings happiness. So زهرة الحياة الدنيا, the beauty of this worldly life. تبتهج بها نفوس المغترين. Those who are deceived, when they see such a thing and they become in state of happiness or joy, why they're deceived? If it takes them. Not that it's condemned, of course not. Whatever is beautiful, it's beautiful. It's the creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But if it deceives them, as it's mentioned in the verse, وَتَأْخُذُ إِعْجَابًا بِأَبْصَارِ الْمُعْرِضِينَ, that makes them like by those who are turning away from the revelation from Allah. And it would make them also like what the disbelievers are upon, or what the evil ones are upon, because they have the beauty of this life, some of them. وتأخذ إعجابا بأبصار المعرضين ويتمتع بها بقطع النظر عن الآخرة القوم الظالمون. So الظالمون, the wrongdoers, they enjoy it, but with بقطع النظر, without looking, by severing the real look to the hereafter. So as you see here, الاستمتاع, or to enjoy زهرة الحياة الدنيا, the adornment of this life, there's nothing wrong with it, as long as with it is looking at the hereafter, as mentioned yesterday, and the verses to look always at the end of things. أصحاب النهى, أولي النهى, the people of al-aql, the people of intellect and reason, they see it the way it is, that this is a mean and not a goal in itself, and not to forbid what Allah permitted. And this is for looking at it in a way that would not sever the look to the hereafter. Because if a person does that, that means he's only indulged into this worldly life and the desires of it, which is basically the life of forgetfulness, the life of sins, the life of being miserable. Because when a person sees the affairs of the people are not according to what a human being wishes, but it's according to the wisdom of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the creator of the heavens and the earth, is saying that وَلَا تَمُدَّنَّ عَيْنَيْكَ إِلَى مَا مَتَّعْنَا بِهِ أَزْوَاجًا مِّنْهُمْ زَهْرَةَ الْحَيَاةِ الدُّنْيَا. He says, ثُمَّ تَذْهَبُ سَرِيعًا, then it goes away quickly, very fast it goes away. وَتَمْضِي جَمِيعًا, and all goes away. And it's just, if you're seeing that now, do not look, do not extend your eyes, do not keep on staring at it. That would affect your heart. And think, years or seconds or minutes or whatever, it's going to go away. Either it's going to go away from them, or they would go away from it. Either it goes away from them while they're alive, or they would leave it and die, and they leave it behind. وَتَقْتُلُ مُحِبِّيهَا وَعُشَّاقَهَا. And this zahra of al-hayat al-dunya, the adornment of this worldly life, kills its lovers. وَعُشَّاقَ, those who are in love with it. فَيَنْدَمُونَ حَيْثُ لَا تَنْفَعُ النَّدَامَةِ. So they would regret when the regret would never benefit them, when it's too late for them. وَيَعْلَمُونَ مَا هُمْ عَلَيْهِ, and they would know what they are upon إِذَا قَدِمُوا يَوْمَ الْقِيَامَةِ, because they're in forgetfulness. So they won't know it till the moment of death, till the day of Al-Qiyamah. Then they would see what their affairs were. And this is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, لِنَفْتِنَهُمْ فِي, to test them. لِنَفْتِنَهُمْ فِي. And لِنَفْتِنَهُم is related to مَتَّعْنَا. So we made them enjoy لِنَفْتِنَهُم. We made them enjoy it so that we test them. He says, وَإِنَّمَا جَعَلَهَا اللَّهُ فِتْنَةً وَاخْتِبَارًا لِيَعْلَمَ مَنْ يَقِفُ عِنْدَهَا. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made it fitna, made it a test, a trial, for it to be known مَنْ يَقِفُ عِنْدَهَا وَيَغْتَرُّ بِهَا, the one that gets stuck by it. يقف, stop there. This is the end of him. This is the end of them, which is the worldly benefit. وَيَغْتَرُّ بِهَا, and they're deceived by it. وَمَنْ هُوَ أَحْسَنُ عَمَلًا, versus the one that is the best in actions when it comes to these trials and tests. كما قال تعالى إِنَّا جَعَلْنَا مَا عَلَى الْأَرْضِ زِينَةً لَهَا لِنَبْلُوَهُمْ أَيُّهُمْ أَحْسَنُ عَمَلًا. We made on the face of earth زِينَةً لَهَا, adornment, to test them who among them are the best in actions. وَإِنَّا لَجَعِلُونَ مَا عَلَيْهَا صَعِيدًا جُرُزًا. This is the end. We will make it flattened at the end. So, and before we continue, and this is how it puts it all together. And as it's mentioned before, that this is not to just give some comfort for those who are poor and weak and oppressed, and not to give them the call to be strong and to take the means to be strong. Of course not, because the Quran also directs the believers to be strong and to take the means, but to put things in the right perspective. So that's why, if whether they are weak and oppressed or they're strong and established, in both cases, they are among those who are pleasing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because if they're weak and oppressed and they don't have anything, they're grateful, they're patient, they're not wasting their life, and they're taking the means, and they're not looking in a way that they like what they see with what others have, meaning the disbelievers, because they know that this is a test for them. And if they continue to be disbelievers, then this is a real punishment for them. And if they look at someone that is a believer, for example, then it's a great favor from Allah for the believer. And if they are established on the face of earth and they have wealth and so on, mashallah, this is great. And they enjoy what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala permitted for them without severing the look and the attachment to the hereafter, without fulfilling the rights of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's why the ayah says, وَرِزْقُ رَبِّكَ خَيْرٌ وَأَبْقَى. وَرِزْقُ رَبِّكَ, the provisions of your Lord. What is the provision of your Lord? Everything is a provision from Allah, even the worldly enjoyment of this life. But when it's attributed to Rabbik, your Lord, that means it's something special. Al-Ajil, the immediate one. Rizq Rabbik, in this life, the immediate one, من العلم والإيمان, knowledge and faith. وحقائق الأعمال الصالحة, and the reality of the righteous deeds. Wal-Ajil, the deferred one, the one that is not there yet, which is in the hereafter. من النعيم المقيم, the everlasting delight. والعيش السليم, and the perfect life. في جوار الرب الرحيم, in closeness. Al-Jiwar is when you are a neighbor, when you're close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the Lord of the Alameen, the most merciful subhanahu wa ta'ala. So, خير وأبقى, better. خير from what? مما متعنا به أزواجا في ذاته وصفاته, from what we enjoy, made them enjoy, those who, as mentioned in the verse, in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, his attributes. This is all, of course, better. وأبقى, and it's forever. So all of the na'im, all of the delight in this worldly life, all of the mata' in this worldly life is nothing compared to one place or the space that is occupied by a stick in Jannah. So rizq rabbika here, as they call it, idafatu tashrif, is attribute of honor. Even though all of the rizq is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and the rizq of the kuffar is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but because all of it is a test from Allah, for the believers, they're honored by the provisions of Allah, because they use it with what al-ilm, with what the knowledge would necessitates upon them, and al-iman, and the righteous good deeds. So they would enjoy they have the right enjoyment in this life and in the hereafter. So it's better وَأَبْقَى, and it's forever. It's forever, because the reward of it is continuous in this life and in the hereafter, in the Jannah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So he says here, وَفِي هَذِهِ الْآيَةِ إِشَارَةٌ. This ayah ishara is pointing to something very important. إِلَى أَنَّ الْعَبْدَ إِذَا رَأَى مِنْ نَفْسِهِ طُمُوحًا إِلَى زِينَةِ الدُّنْيَا. Now this is an action that we need to train ourselves to do. that whenever a person finds or sees in himself طموحا, الطموح is the ambition, is the longing for the adornment of this life, وإقبالا عليها, and wanting to go forward on it, أن يذكرها, that a person has to remind himself ما أمامها من رزق ربه, what comes after that from the rizq, from the provisions of his Lord, وأن يوازن بين هذا وهذا, and that he would balance then the things, the matter between this and that. And this is true for every matter, whether, of course, if it's haram, it becomes obvious. So if someone, he finds in himself this longing for something that is haram, the highest paid job in the world, then it's haram, something that Allah clearly forbade. And he wants to have it so that he can find himself established on the face of earth. Then he should remind himself, وَرِزْقُ رَبِّكَ خَيْرٌ وَأَبْقَى. The provisions of your Lord for you as a believer is better, and it's forever. It's an everlasting one. So he would stay away from the haram. If it's something that is halal, perfectly halal, and it helps him on matters of deen, and mashallah, then still a person would think of the rizq of his Lord is khayrun wa abqa, so that it doesn't take him away from the real rizq and the real provisions in the hereafter. So even if it's perfectly halal, then is it going to help him to establish the everlasting rizq and provisions from Allah, or it's going to stop him from that? So therefore, he's always going to be the heart attached to the hereafter, and he would enjoy what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bestowed upon him, but it always comes into the person has to remind oneself. This is the reminder, and the reminder of the Quran. And how the fitna, you know, that when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned in the ayah, and here, don't say that I can see things and it does not affect me. Well, that's not what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the ayah. When someone say, I can look at these things that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bestowed upon the disbelievers, the sinful ones, and I can like it, no problem, whatever they have. But I know that this is not going to be forever. This is something that is not good for them unless they believe, unless they're obedient to Allah. No, your heart, you don't have control over this. This can ruin you. The fact that when you are looking, you don't keep on extending that look with liking what you see. You have to turn away from it. Turn away from it with your heart. This is not that most important thing in this life, because you see that this is a test from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that very soon it's going to leave them, or they're going to leave it, right? And to make sure that the heart is purified from the diseases that can get into it, because the ayah says وَلَا تَمُدَّنَّ عَيْنَيْكَ, so do not extend your eyes. So if you see it, it's not haram to see it, but do not keep on staring in a way that you like what you see. إِلَى مَا مَتَّعْنَا بِهِ أَزْوَاجًا مِّنْهُمْ زَهْرَةَ الْحَيَاةِ الدُّنْيَا, as explained here, that it's zahra. It's the adornment of this life, that a person, when he sees something, is pleased with it. But that's the end of it. It's nothing more than that. لِنَفْتِنَهُمْ فِيهِ, the lamb here, this is the reason for it, for them to be tested in it. And as the hadith, as Ibn Kathir rahimahullah mentioned that in the tafsir of the verse, when Umar radiallahu anhu entered on the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam, when he was secluded from his wives alayhi salatu wasalam, and he was alayhi salatu wasalam laying down on the sand, and a hasir, a straw mat, and there's nothing in the room whatsoever except a skin thing that has water in it, and the straw mat marked the side of the Prophet ﷺ because of its roughness. And Umar radiallahu anhu, he was about to weep, or he wept, and the Prophet ﷺ said to him, "Ma yubkik, what makes you weep?" He says, "Ya Rasulullah, inna Kisra wa Qaysar." O Messenger of Allah, Kisra, the king of Persia, Qaysar, the king of the Romans, fima huma fi, they have whatever they have of their palaces and their adornment of this life and their wealth and power and so on. وَأَنْتَ صَفْوَةُ اللَّهِ مِنْ خَلْقِهِ, and you are the chosen one of the creation of Allah, the best of all of the human beings, and this is your affairs. So the Prophet ﷺ said to him, أو في شك أنت يا ابن الخطاب, are you in doubt, O ibn al-Khattab? أولئك قوم عجلت لهم طيباتهم في حياتهم الدنيا. These are people that طيبات, the good things have been given them in haste in this worldly life because they have nothing in the hereafter. So the Prophet ﷺ, being in that state, he was the most content, the happiest person on the face of earth. And also when the Prophet ﷺ mentioned Zaharat al-Hayat al-Dunya, the adornment of this life, he mentioned in the hadith, إن أخوف ما أخاف عليكم ما يفتح الله من زهرة الدنيا. The most fearful thing I fear for you, what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala opened for you, give you from the Zahra, from the adornment of this world. So they said to the Prophet ﷺ, وَمَا زَهْرَةُ الدُّنْيَا رَسُولَ اللَّهِ. They know that the Zahra, as we talked about it, is the first thing that comes, the shoot that comes from the flowers and things like this. What is it, O Messenger of Allah? He says, بَرَكَاتُ الْأَرْضِ, the blessings of this world. And what is meant by that, if it takes you away from the dhikr of Allah, the remembrance of Allah, from the obedience of Allah. And therefore the believers, when they reach that state, the qadr of Allah, they take the means. And what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala chose for them, they know that this is what is best for them. Because that's their test at that time. And people are tested differently. So to be pleased with whatever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tested them with, and at all cases, they're fulfilling the commands of Allah. So, and you connect that to the previous verse when they're giving you all kinds of harm and things like this, لَا تَمُدَّنَّ عَيْنَيْكَ. And this is such a riyada, such a, not necessarily like physical activity, but this is how to wean our hearts, to work on the diseases of our hearts, constantly to remind ourselves of what's the best and what needs to be focused upon. And this world is not the place where a person would fulfill all of his desires. This is not the covenant between us and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's the hereafter, without again undermining the goodness of this life. رَبَّنَا آتِنَا فِي الدُّنْيَا حَسَنَةً وَفِي الْآخِرَةِ حَسَنَةً وَقِنَا عَذَابَ النَّارِ. So we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for al-afiyah and the rest of this life and the hereafter. So then after that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَأْمُرْ أَهْلَكَ بِالصَّلَاةِ وَاصْطَبِرْ عَلَيْهَا لا نسألك رزقا نحن نرزقك والعاقبة للتقوى. Now here's another command. وأمر أهلك. حث أهلك. Encourage, command your families على الصلاة, بالصلاة, to establish the salah. وأزعجهم إليها من فرض ونفل. أزعجهم, this is a very interesting word that he used. Al-iz'aj is when you disturb someone. When someone is resting and relaxing, and you kind of disturb that mood that they have. So what is meant by that is أزعجهم إليها. That means this is your responsibility 5 times a day, and even nafl, as you mentioned, من فرض ونفل. Then don't leave your family like this relaxing. That you have to, the 5 daily salah, to make sure that they are establishing the salah. The fard and the nafl. We were talking about that last night. The issue of the nafl salah even. In a way that, of course, different than the way the fard is. And the Prophet ﷺ would wake them up for the night's prayer. And he would warn them of the fitan. ﷺ. And that's Umar radiallahu anhu, for example. He would have an hour during the night when he prays. And then he would say, and after he prays, and he would say, وَأْمُرْ أَهْلَكَ بِالصَّلَاةِ وَاصْطَبِرْ عَلَيْهِ. He would quote the verse, and he would wake up his family for the qiyamul layl. Qiyamul layl is not fard. And the Prophet ﷺ would do the same thing to his families. And he would say that this is the means to protect oneself from the fitan. أَيْقِظُ صَوَاحِبَ الْحُجُرَاتِ. He would say, wake up the dwellers of the hujurat, the rooms, meaning his wives. That I see the fitan, the trials coming down onto their places. So the way to protect oneself from the fitan is through the night prayers. So he says, وَأَزْعِجْهُمْ إِلَيْهَا مِنْ فَرْضٍ وَنَفْلٍ وَالْأَمْرُ بِالشَّيْءِ أَمْرٌ بِجَمِيعِ مَا لَا يَتِمُّ إِلَّا بِهِ. And if it's a command about something, it means anything that is to be done to establish it, then it's also a command of it. That means فَيَكُونُ أَمْرًا بِتَعْلِيمِهِم. This is a command to teach them. ما يصلح الصلاة, what rectifies the salah, ويفسدها, what breaks it, ويكملها. So the tahara, the conditions for it, how to make wudu, how to perfect the salah, it's all part of that. وَأْمُرْ أَهْلَكَ بالصلاة and واصطبر عليها. Make yourself patient. أي على الصلاة upon the صلاة بإقامتها بحدودها وأركانها وآدابها وخشوعها. The صلاة, this is an act of patience on a daily basis. فرض النفل. And if a person thinks that that's it, there's no more patience when it comes to establishing the salah, he gets used to it, then that's wrong. That means there's something wrong with the way that he is doing the salah. Because if you endure patience to at least make the salah on time, and then you endure patience to make sure that it's done in the masjid, that requires patience on a daily basis. And even if you get used to that, you have to be patient to establish it with its khushu', with its pillars, with its adab and manners. And that requires constant patience to be upon that and to seek help from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He says, فَإِنَّ ذَلِكَ مُشِقٌ عَلَى النَّفْسِ. This is difficult for the nafs, requires patience. ولكن ينبغي إكراهها وجهادها على ذلك. So النفس, the human nafs, we have to understand, and that's one of the way to benefit from the Quran, that the Quran teaches us who are we. It teaches us what kind of a nafs and being we have, so that we're not deceived. Your nafs, my nafs, everyone's nafs always pulls us down to be lazy, to be away from what is benefiting for oneself. So that means what? You have to be constantly having jihad on your own self. And you have to make yourself do what it doesn't like to do. But not in the absolute sense like this, but based on the wahy revelation from Allah. Not like those who went into the extreme of, they say you have to be disobedient to your own nafs no matter what. So if it's hungry, don't feed it. If it wants to sleep, don't make it sleep. This is of course wrong. And that's not the way the Prophet ﷺ. You have to be kind to your own self. But what is meant by that is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants from you. And at that moment where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants from you, for example, to establish the salah, pray salatul fajr. Before fajr, how was your affair? When waking up, before that qiyamul layl, you feel like you want to sleep longer. Right? This is what your nafs is in that state. Then your duty is to make it, or to do what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants from you, what your nafs doesn't want to do. This is ikrahuha wa jihaduha, and you struggle with it. You're in a war with it. والصبر معها دائما, and توطن نفسك, to make yourself, that's it, that's to be upon sabr constantly with oneself, because it's just from one level to the other. Why especially the salah? واصطبر عليها, and to keep the same thing with patience with your family, with your children. Why is that? فإن العبد إذا أقام صلاته, because the abd, if he established his salah على الوجه المأمور به, upon the way that he has been commanded to do. Because again, people might make their salah, but this is really the salah that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ordered us to establish? So if a person establishes it in the way that Allah wants from us, كَانَ لِمَا سِوَاهَ مِنْ دِينِهِ أَحْفَظَ وَأَقْوَمْ. That means that individual will be, to the rest of the deen, more guarding it and more establishing it. And the opposite is also true. وَإِذَا ضَيَّعَهَا, if he did not take care of his salah, كَانَ لِمَا سِوَاهَ أَضْيَعَ. That means to the rest of the deen, he is even more likely to ruin. وَأَمُرْ أَهْلَكَ بِالصَّلَاةِ وَاصْطَبِرْ عَلَيْهَا لَا نَسْأَلُكَ رِزْقًا. And see how the rizq is mentioned here. We don't ask you for rizq. أي رزقك علينا. We don't ask you for rizq. That means your provisions is upon us. Allah will provide for you. Your provision is already given. قَدْ تَكَفَّلْنَا بِهِ. We already took care of it. تَكَفَّلْنَا. كما تكفلنا بأرزاق الخلائق كلهم, as all of the خلائق, the rizq is by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. فكيف بمن قام بأمرنا واشتغل بذكرنا. So how is it then for the one that fulfilled the commands of Allah, our command, and busy with our dhikr? You think that he's not going to be provided for? If Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala provide for the kafir, he's not going to provide for you? If Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala provide for the birds, for the cockroaches, for the ants, for the everything, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would not provide for you when you are in His service, in the obedience of Allah? That can never be. وَرِزْقُ اللَّهِ عَامٌ لِلْمُتَّقِي وَغَيْرِ. And there is the provisions of Allah for everyone, the one that has taqwa and the one that doesn't have taqwa. Therefore, فَيَنْبَغِي الْإِهْتِمَامُ بِمَا يَجْلُبُ السَّعَادَةَ الْأَبَدِيَّةَ. So what needs to be done is to give attention and importance to what brings the everlasting happiness. فَهُوَ التَّقْوَى وَالْعَاقِبَةُ لِلتَّقْوَى. The end is for the taqwa. ولهذا قال والعاقبة في الدنيا والآخرة. The end, the good end in this world and the hereafter للتقوى, for the obedience of Allah, التي هي فعل المأمور وترك المنهي, which is to do what has been commanded and to stay away from what is forbidden. فمن قام بها, the taqwa of Allah, كان له العاقبة, he has the عاقبة, the outcome is best for him, كما قال تعالى والعاقبة للمتقين. And therefore, this is how the matter becomes very easy for the believer. Just look at the 5 daily salah. That's the most important act in one's day, with al-iman, with the proper faith, with the proper aqidah. And then this is where everything else becomes established in one's life. And as if a person would fulfill the salah the way it ought to be, as the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, hadith Qudsi, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Ya ibn Adam, tafarragh li salati, li ibadati. O son of Adam, tafarragh, empty yourself when you are in that state of the ibadah to Allah. If you say Allahu Akbar and you are in the salah, empty yourself from everything and anything except what you are engaged in, which is the ibadah, the worship of Allah. What's the reward? أَمْلَأُ صَدْرَكَ غِنَى, I would fill your heart with ghina. You'll be the richest person on the face of earth in your heart. You will see that you are in no need of anyone. وَأَسُدَّ فَقْرَكَ, and I would fit and fill your poverty, your needs. وَإِن لَمْ تَفْعَلْ, and if you don't do so, if you don't empty yourself from everything except the devotion in your salah, مَلَأْتُ صَدْرَكَ شُغُلًا, I would fill your heart busyness, distraction. I have to do this and this is going to ruin me. This is going to, bother me, all kinds of things. The concerns of this worldly life. وَلَمْ أَسُدَّ فَقْرَكَ, and you would never be anything but poor, always be in that state of poverty. So to make all of the humum, all the concerns, one ham, one concern only, and that is to seek the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone. And whoever has this, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will suffice for him. All of his concerns, all of his worldly concerns will be taken care of. And all of that does not mean that a person does not take the physical means, because we're commanded to take the physical means. And it shows that when it's time for the salah, when it's time for the ibadah, when it's the obedience of Allah, the hearts are attached to the hereafter. With all of these meanings, this is where the happiness in this life and hereafter is attained, as we heard. And whoever takes the path of obedience to Allah, the ways that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala deal with his servants, that he would open ways for them, but then they never thought of it in the beginning. So you don't have to see the end of it, how it's drawn from one step after the other, because that's what many people, they don't take the path of steadfastness upon the deen of Allah because they see the physical means. But when a person have this truthfulness and believing and certainty in the rewards from Allah, and they would take the means of being obedient to Allah while taking the means also for what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala permitted, and then they leave the matter to Allah. Don't worry, relax, it's going to come. Whatever is pleasing for you, it's going to happen if you would focus on what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commanded us to be upon. So we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to guide us and to protect us from the evil within our own selves, and to help us to understand and to implement what we have been commanded to do. As you heard here, even with every word, even though we didn't give it its rights the way it ought to be, with the relationship of this and the provisions and these things that annoys many people in this life, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sufficed it for the believers and made it very easy for them. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the provider subhanahu wa ta'ala. And as one very simple thing is, which we all have to be addressed by that, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, "La nas'aluka rizqan," it requires people with intellect, because again, only noha, so that nobody would say, does that mean that we stay away from seeking provisions? Nobody would ever say that. As one of the statements in this verse, when Imam Qurtubi and others, they said, the meaning of it, "La nas'aluka rizqan," we don't ask you to provide for yourself. We don't ask you to provide for your family. Because if that's what concerns you, makes you not establish the salat the way it ought to be, because you're worried about your family, you're worried about yourself, no, we will take care of it. بَلْ نَحْنُ نَتَكَفَّلُ بِرِزْقِكَ وَإِيَّهُمْ. We will suffice for your provisions, you and your family. So this is basically what the verse says. And that's why the Prophet ﷺ, whenever there's tightness in provisions, the Prophet ﷺ would order them to make salah. And with the physical means, no doubt, this is anyone with the slightest amount of intellect, he understand that very well. But it's the religious means and where the hearts are upon. And even, when people would say, for example, they're not ready to get married, they're not ready to have children because of the concern about the financial being of their children and things like this. How am I going to feed them? All of that is a sign of a disease in the heart. Person does not believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He's the provider. Person would say, but we have to take the physical means. This is always the response of someone that has weakness in the heart. Because there's no aqil, as we said. When people are insane, that's different. But when someone is aqil, no one would say, I won't take the physical means. So never to bring the physical means as an excuse to disobey Allah, or not to do things where the hearts are terrifying. So therefore, if a person gets married, marriage is one of the means of rizq. Be patient. If you have children, the children to have offspring, this is one of the means of rizq, because you are not the one that provides for them. You have been just entrusted, and the provider is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and you only take the means. We don't ask you for their provisions. This is not your job. But you see the hadith, كَفَى بِالْمَرْءِ غِشًّا أَنْ يُضَيَّعْ مَنْ يَعُودُ, that it is sufficient betrayal for a person when he ruins the ones that depends on him. Yes, so you have to take the means and earn for your family and to spend on them, otherwise you're sinful. But who's the one that is providing for them? Not you, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will, He can make you not able to do it. So you're taking the physical means, and that's also by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and the hearts are attached to Allah, and it can never be that the provisions from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that you would seek it in sinful means. And if people take sinful means and Allah provides for them, yes, because it's a test. But remember, what is for Rabbik? The rizq of your Lord, that's the best, and that's the everlasting and the most enduring one. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give us the reality of it, inshallah. Barakallahu feekum. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala again give us that steadfastness, and it's to make this a reality in our life. Otherwise it becomes against us. And this is the way of the Sahaba radiallahu anhum. They would learn the ayat and they would apply it. And they would go to the next set of verses. So that we're not just having some information. Otherwise, as we heard before, that makes a person does not have any knowledge whatsoever. The knowledge is to put it into action. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us guidance and patience to implement the commands and the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. سبحانك اللهم ربنا وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.